Welcome to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. Yo, the truth echoes off the walls like reverb. Every scoop that goes pop rocks a space like comets. Check how my phonics capture rings like Sonic. Double duty when I drop it. Flow with beauty when I rip it. Never snooty when I rap it. Counting bunches when I pick it. Pull no punches when I spit it, cause I'm different when I hit it. Bring your money when you bid it, cause I come in jets to lift it. I got crazy bread, you could call it biscuit. You flakes can never rise, don't you even try to risk it. Haters, close your eyes, cause my flow is something mystic. You pretzels are too salty by the way you get it twisted. This is just another rebel missive. I'm addicted, give me things that I can fix, kid. If I ever leave, all my haters, they would miss me. By the way, our guest is Adam Zarazinski. As always, I'm your host, Alex Thorne, head of firm-wide research at Galaxy Digital. Thank you for listening to Galaxy Brains. We have a great show for you today. As I said, CEO of Inca Digital, Adam Zarazinski, is our guest, a blockchain and digital asset data analytics firm. We'll talk with Adam about the dark web, foreign scams, national security implications of crypto. It's a fascinating conversation. And we'll check in with our good friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading, as always, to talk markets. But before we get to all of that, I need to remind you to please refer to the link to the disclaimer in the podcast notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy Digital or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. This is a great show, so let's get right into it. Let's go now to our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. As always, Beimnet, great to have you.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, big day, Fed Day.
Fed Day.
Fed Day. Was it a Super Bowl day?
No. It's like a wild card playoff round at best. At best. I mean, this was like the most lackluster, uninspiring FOMC I've seen in a while. And I think it just goes to show you we're near the end and that there's going to be a lot less volatility that's going to be a function of Fed policy. And I think the future drivers of markets, or the next sort of big things for markets are going to be less oriented around Fed policy. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it was an exciting day. Powell, basically said that, they hiked rates right now because the data suggested that they should, and that going forward, they're going to be data dependent, as they always have been.
Same story.
Same story as last time. There's very minimal changes in the statement.
Yeah, it was very minimal.
He did acknowledge, the constructive elements of the last, CPI print, and that, if they were to see follow on, that would be, a welcome sort of sight.
Which we all know, right?
Yes, correct.
So it's like he's just saying he's
just reiterating the same stuff,
yeah.
And then he's still, thinks that the balance of risk is skewed towards not doing enough to combat inflation, rather than
going too hard
and hard landing, and because that stuff's reversible.
Well, and we've been talking about this now for months, maybe even a year.
Yeah.
The hard landing, we're just not seeing it yet. Like it could still come, but it's
definitely
unemployment's
not
still low, the housing market's still high, wages are still going up.
Yeah, I mean, we've forecasted away the recession that we had forecast.
Yeah.
Right, and so there's definitely been stronger elements of growth, but what's important about this stuff is that this growth hasn't come at the at the expense of high inflation.
Yeah.
Or it's come at the expense of inflation, as inflation has been coming down. One interesting statistic that, I just got from Jeffrey Gundlach, famous bond investor at Double Line Capital, is that if you replace the owner's equivalent rent component of headline CPI with more live, accurate housing metrics, you'd be talking about headline that was at zero or close to it.
Wow.
Right? And so there are certain elements of the inflation story that tell you, the Fed should be done right now. That, monetary policy works on a lag, and it's clearly working. And we're getting even more restrictive now when we're seeing it working. And so it really depends on what your perspective is. But there are just so many strange structural elements to this, like the current macro landscape, that it makes it very difficult to have confidence in your assessment, right? Is housing tight because everybody has a mortgage and supply tight, right? Are rents going to come down? Are there structural things in the supply chain that have fundamentally altered, where inflation can get to and where it can't, et cetera? And so there are all these new, strange post-COVID dynamics that, market participants and central bankers have to take into account.
Right.
So it's really tough to say with any confidence, this is what you should do.
Right.
In addition, I think it's worth noting that you've only just had one soft inflation number. Right. There are there are elements of weakness, but you still have the tightest labor market in history, right? And prices are still going up. They're going up at a relatively slower rate, but
still higher than you'd like.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's really important to note that I didn't think Powell did a great job of addressing was the easing in monetary conditions. By that I mean stocks are at the dead highs.
Yeah.
NASDAQ's up 38% on the year.
That's crazy.
Right?
I think you said that to me last week or the week before. There was at the time it was up like 40%. I'm like,
yeah, it moved down.
So
last
it's
week
like what, one of the best stock years ever for the NASDAQ?
Yeah, absolutely.
Meanwhile, everyone's been out. It's been a wall of worry the entire time.
Wall of worry.
Yeah.
And the pain trade was higher because
went.
everybody was worried.
It's crazy.
And now it's like, wait, if stocks rip another 10%, everybody's gonna feel rich again.
Yeah.
And what does that do to inflation?
It should push it up, yeah. People spend more. I mean, yeah.
Spend more, feel richer,
take more debt
effects.
out. Think that they can. Remember what people were doing at the 21 mania is they were mortgaging their homes, or they were buying like Dogecoin, using their stock portfolio as collateral.
I mean,
like
at 2 3/4 interest rates, I'd borrow as much money as possible to buy
That's what people were doing. I saw there's this terrible Reddit subreddit where there'll be people that they ask for financial advice, and sometimes you see screenshots they're really bad.
They're really bad.
And the guy's like, I put up my stock portfolio at the highs to use it as collateral to borrow money to purchase a home, and now the stocks are all down a lot. Can I get out of it or anything? And
no,
they were like,
those are bad.
You're in trouble.
But
I'm saying
back to your point,
that attitude could return, and that would cause a lot more inflation too. I mean, that's an extreme example, but in general.
I mean, meme stocks are the best performing stocks this year. The GS custom basket that I look at, I think, is up 100%.
GS has a meme stock basket?
Oh, absolutely.
Love that.
Absolutely.
Wow.
But anyway, I think you bring up an important point, which is, monetary policy is meant to address the needs of the everyday person, right? The reason why Powell feels so compelled to hike rates by 550 basis points in such short order is because the average person, their ability to consume has been constantly getting eroded. Now, the question is that level of erosion getting to acceptable levels? Right? And when you look at headline numbers, they actually look okay, right? But there's just still perpetually the risk of reacceleration.
Yes.
Now, I think it brings us to just another point, which I think is worth noting, is that households are actually still okay, right? If you look at credit card delinquency data, it hasn't shot up that much, right? Household savings, they've come down a lot and are expected to decline. You still see a lot of spending, right? And so. Some of it might be on credit, et cetera, but there's still momentum behind a lot of the consumer and the average, person. And so, I'm still in the camp that, you haven't really addressed inflation because those people still have jobs and wages are still going up at 4+%, and asset prices are still going up. And while there are signs that, they're weakening things here and there,
so now they just lower the magnitude that they're increasing each time. But to your point,
the frequency. That's the other important part.
What have they been doing now? Every other one? Mm-hmm. So they raised. What's the last couple been? So this was 25 bips they raised. And then the last one they didn't.
They didn't raise.
And then they raised 25 before that.
Correct.
Did they not raise before that, or have they?
No, they were raising.
That's when
every
they went 50,
meeting
25.
Yeah.
None, then 25.
Yeah, correct.
And now what do we think now? They're going to raise through the rest of the year? I mean, essentially, most likely.
So I think the most likely scenario is another hike in November, and there's about, let's say, 10 basis points priced in.
And they take a break here, right? They don't do one in August, or they don't do one in September.
August.
So none in August.
September,
October, November,
and then November.
September, November.
Yeah.
So you think a pause and then another one in November.
Correct.
Got it. So another 25 bips on top through the end of the year, basically.
I think the market thinks there's another 10 basis points left.
I see. So they think
less than half.
They think less than a 25 bips likelihood, quote unquote.
So they're
you think the full 25
a
once
40% probability of a hike.
Yeah.
But then what's really interesting is also just the pricing around cuts, right? And so basically,
I saw this on the panel, right? Like the market is pricing cuts like next year, starting next year.
Absolutely.
And it's like, we're going to see that. We're not going to see cuts unless there's like massive economic issue, right? Like if the recession appears, there's no reason to cut.
Right. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's
right?
my sense.
But there has to be a structural like premium or structural discount, however you want to think about it, because the risk is that when they do cut, they cut like 100. You don't know like the magnitude of the cut, right? Because like if we are in a recession, it's a hard landing, and there's some shit happening. Like, dude, they could go 200 basis points in a day.
Well,
that takes you back to like neutral,
right.
and
that's
so
why they brought it all the way up here, so they have all that flexibility now. Yeah,
correct. And so it makes it really tricky.
I see.
To think about. And so like you could look at the curve and be like, wait, terminal rates around 350, whatever that band is. Might be too high because if we are going to hit that hard landing and all that, like we're going to be cutting rates. Oh, the corn is going higher.
Let's go 29.4.
Yeah, 450.
But let's talk about the corn real quick before we break. I mean, because we had a pretty big, it's time for the corn to go now. Yeah, and we pulled to the top of the range, like, or a yearly high briefly after BlackRock's announcement about the ETF, like over the last month. And then we were really just in that tight 30 to 31 range for like weeks. Then we had a little bit of a dump over the last weekend, and got down to what, 29.2-ish, 29?
29 the figure.
Or even 28 something actually briefly.
Yeah, basically 29,000 even.
So, but still, we're super low vol. I mean, it's been in this thing for a while. What do we think? What brings us out of this?
Fundamentally, if the market is perceiving the Fed as ending their hiking cycle, or this is kind of it, and EU just had some really weak data. Looks like BOJ is not going to go on yield curve control this meeting. PBOC is easing, etc. And I'm looking at price action in things like silver and gold, and those things are trading really well. And just broader risk assets, stocks being close to the dead highs of the year. If you think about crypto as a function of risk assets and debasement hedges, both of those components would suggest that Bitcoin should be doing well here. And then, the other thing to think about are just more technical things, like what is positioning and funding and derivatives positioning look like in Bitcoin. And I think positioning is a lot cleaner than where it was a couple of weeks ago in terms of levered longs at the highs. I do think that there's been a healthy sort of washout of sort of weaker hands, let's put it that way. And that the path is set for a move higher. Make no mistake, I think, if you do believe that an ETF is coming, this asset is not priced for the kind of liquidity that is coming in.
No.
It is dramatically mispriced. And if you're telling me that the macro currents are going to be supportive of it, in addition to the fact that you're going to get a large ETF by
and don't forget, you have the halving is going to happen about 9 months from now.
Correct. And so
10 months.
I think dips are there to be bought.
Yeah.
And upsides there to be owned.
Interesting.
It's that easy.
Love it. Hey, this was a great one.
Absolutely.
I love that it does feel like easier to do Super Bowl Fed Day now. It's not that everything's
It's not just pain.
Yeah, I know, right? We know where we're at. Well, that's good.
More hikes.
Beimnet Abebe, our friend from Galaxy Trading, as always, my friend. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Let's go now to our guest, Adam Zarazinski, CEO of Inca Digital, a digital asset data analytics company. Adam, thank you so much for coming on Galaxy Brains.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's been, I would say it's been a long time in the making, although we've only had this podcast for about a year. Actually, I think this will be our 70 or 71st episode, so a little bit more than a year.
Congrats.
But we've known each other for a decent amount of time, and I think our audience will be interested to understand what Inca Digital does. What is a blockchain data analytics company? What do you guys do?
Yeah. So we're a little different than the blockchain data analytics companies that are typical in the space. The forensics companies like Chainalysis, TRM, CipherTrace, Elliptic, all those companies. Yeah. So if I can just kind of generally break down the data that we pull in and then productize. First is crypto market data. So we're plugged into about 350 centralized exchanges, decentralized exchanges globally. That's category one. The forensics companies do not collect that data, right? They do not have market data. There are other great companies in the space that do. Your friend, of course, Nick Carter at Coinmetrics, they've got that data.
Coinmetrics and Keiko, Amber Data.
Exactly, all those companies, yeah. So
which is also like data analytics. So it's
it's just a different focus, right? So that data, we run our own nodes. We collect blockchain data too. We also, the second category of data is what we call technical and blockchain data. So it includes us running our own nodes and collecting that data, but also GitHub repos, data from the dark web, stuff like that. That's category 2. And then category 3, and I know you want to get on dark web.
Yeah.
Category 3 is natural language data, so data from news and social media.
Oh, cool.
We collect data across the open web, and then we've got 5 custom social media connectors now, which I can dive into. So we pull all the data into our system, and then we build tools on top of it. Those can be simple market data tools, right? Like an API of open high pricing, open high low close volume VWAP, every executed trade across X number of exchanges, and then risk management tools, that incorporate social media, that incorporate blockchain data, that incorporate market data, all kind of mashed together and then shoved into an API, depending on the use case.
Got it.
So that's what we do. Yeah.
So, and then what types of, do you have service the same types of customer groups as like a Chainalysis? I mean, I'll set the baseline here, right? At Chainalysis, one of the core things they do, and I'm not, speaking on behalf of the team at Chainalysis, but complying with, say, the Bank Secrecy Act. If you're a crypto financial company, right, you may have to file suspicious activity reports. You certainly also have to comply with sanctions, right? So you'll screen your transactions as they come in and out. If you're an exchange, for example, see if any of the transactors, the receiving or sending addresses appear on like the SDN list, for example.
Right, exactly.
That's a service that they provide, right? And also they'll do risk scoring on like, well, did this thing hit a gambling site or a Tumblr or whatever. So that's a pretty clear set of clients. What does your sort of customer base look like?
Yeah, it's a similar customer base. So I break it down kind of. We're B2B only. So we focus on traditional financial institutions that are moving into crypto, large crypto service providers, right? The large centralized exchanges, decentralized exchanges, folks like yourselves, right? That are kind of crypto native but need B2B data analytics and services, and then government agencies. And we work within those 3 industries. And then, but our focus is not blockchain data, right? So the sanctions is actually a really good example. Or like if you broaden it out a little bit beyond sanctions to just like scams and frauds and people that are like sanctioned and businesses that are sanctioned, right? So our focus is more not on the wallet side, but on person names, company names, types of scams. Amounts lost, locations, things like that. So if you think of those forensics companies as like a bottom-up approach to data analytics in this space, right? Focusing on blockchains, we're a top-down. We're focusing on people, companies, and things like that, and then connecting that back to what's happening in crypto.
Interesting. It's like, it feels like a more investigative approach, the thesis-driven investigative approach to it, right? Figure out these types of scams, then connect it all together.
Exactly.
I want to talk about some of the types of scams because there was a really interesting story that I think you were quoted in, and I know you guys and you did some work on according to the story too, but also we've chatted about this before. I'm going to tease the audience by not talking about that just yet. I want to go back to the dark web thing. What types of data are you finding these days give me like an update on it. It's been a while since I was a dark web researcher myself, which I have been at various times in my past, but I'm not up to like what's happening on the dark web still. Do we still have like alpha bays and like illicit marketplaces? What else is happening out there?
Yes, still illicit marketplaces, of course. And generally speaking, right, what we're looking for is money laundering, the purchase of precursor materials for weapons of mass destruction.
Seems like a good thing to prevent.
All of those things and the intersection of those things in crypto. I can tell you, a couple interesting stories just on how things that you might not expect are interconnected and why it's important to focus on kind of like these disparate data sets and bring them together. And I know I'm being a little vague, so we can like talk about it in more detail. But Yes.
Yeah. Can you give an example maybe of a dark web investigation that, or with however much specificity you can?
Yeah. I can give you two. We can talk about pig butchering first if you want.
Well, that was the one that I was referencing before. There was let's talk about pig butchering. Why not? It's such a lovely term.
Yeah.
First of all, what is pig butchering?
Okay, so pig butchering is the term that the scammers use, not us, right? Nor law enforcement. This is it's called Shuzupan or something. I'm probably butchering the name.
Yeah.
But that's the term that they use. And so I can basically walk you through. Let me walk you through from first a product perspective.
Yeah.
All the way through what we identified and kind of like what the news, like what media outlets are saying, and then kind of like what's actually happening. Okay, so from product perspective first, focusing on that. So we have a tool that's called Scam and Fraud API. It's if you know FINRA's broker check, it's like that
for fraud
on steroids for crypto, right?
Okay, yeah.
So what we do is we collect a lot of data across the open web and social media. I'm going to use Twitter as an example. Let's imagine that you, Alex, tweet out something like, this guy, Adam Zarazinski, enticed me to invest $100,000 worth of Bitcoin into his company called Inca Digital. I think it's a scam company. I sent it, 3 months ago, and he convinced me a 10x return in a week, and it's been 3 months. I think he ran away with my money. I sent it all to wallet address ABC123. So that's your tweet.
Yeah.
Okay. What we essentially do is you can imagine us breaking down that tweet in an API. The name of the victim, the name of the scammer, the name of the shell company, if we can geotag any of that, the location of the person or the company, any other outside data that we have, like registry information for that company, the amount lost, the wallet address, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So that's the tool. We sell that tool, but then we also use that tool ourselves. We got an entire kind of like intelligence investigations team that looks at our data, kind of eats our own dog food, and then spits out reports and stuff like that I know you want to get into. We saw a trend of people essentially complaining that they were getting scammed on dating websites, places like Tinder, and started looking into it. And this was a long time ago. This was like 2.5 years ago. What we found is that there's a scam taking place in the billions of dollars. Wow. It's a giant transfer of wealth from the U.S. and Europe back to China for what is known as pig butchering. And it's essentially a scam where people are kind of create relationships with these scammers online, and they're ultimately convinced to invest money in a fake company.
So is it like what do they call it? Like catfishing, kind of?
Yeah, it's kind of like catfishing. Yeah. But like it's getting fairly sophisticated. Like sometimes they even have like fake websites where like you can like see your account information and how much money you've made, but then ultimately all the money disappears.
But it starts on a dating site, so you've got like a man or a woman in the West.
Yeah,
typically.
let me give you a real example. So so we had a victim that was quoted in the news, a public school teacher recently divorced out of Troy, Michigan, right? 2 kids, owns has a mortgage out on her home. She meets this guy online. They start online dating. She's never met him in person. She's convinced to invest something small, $2,000. She does, she like triples her money, right, on like whatever like
website they show her.
Exactly. Then she's convinced to invest more. So then she takes out a second mortgage on her home, invests like all of her savings, everything that she's got. She's like $250 deep. Then obviously all the money disappears, and she has no recourse whatsoever. It goes to the FBI. But I mean, the size and scale of the scam is such that there's not even much that the FBI can do. Like maybe they can freeze funds, right? So that's just one example.
How many of these examples are there? Like how
tens of thousands,
wow.
Tens of thousands of examples,
wow.
and we estimate like over $5 billion has been lost.
Oh my God!
Yeah, a lot of money.
And then, what are the mechanics? So we have a relationship, and at some point, I casually, if I'm the pig butcherer. So I'm understanding now you're luring in this pig, you're fattening them up.
That's exactly, yeah. So we even have their, so going to like the natural language data side of the data that we collect, we even have their training manual.
Oh God.
And so like, you
like found this on their own like bulletin board type stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I can share it with whoever's interested.
Oh my God.
That's watching the show.
That's interesting.
But like there's even annexes. Like, so there's like, if how you approach this type of person, there's like annex like C for like homosexuals, elderly, thirsty men.
And then an entire way of approaching
them. Yeah, all the TTPs.
Oh my gosh. There's a deep script.
A deep script.
It's like so you build a relationship then, and then at some point I introduce, and what are they typically offering as the investment? What are they saying it is? Is it like in a crypto or is it in real estate? Like what is it they're suggesting?
It's like in like a fake hedge fund or fake fund.
So it's like an investment vehicle.
Okay. Exactly.
And then what are they telling the victim to send them?
So they'll typically walk them through setting up an account on a centralized exchange, right? So most of these people are either completely new to crypto or maybe own crypto, but are not moving kind of beyond like, buying Bitcoin on Coinbase or something like that. So they will set up an account or already have an account on their local centralized exchange somewhere. And then they say, okay, now send that money to this wallet address, right? This is like our hedge fund's
is it typically Bitcoin or?
It starts out as Bitcoin. It'll start out as Bitcoin or Ethereum. We can catch, based on transaction patterns, we can actually catch it that early.
Wow.
So we can catch it as early as like not the first transaction, but we can catch it before these victims get too deep. So yeah, but it's typically Bitcoin to start. They'll send the Bitcoin to a wallet address, and then from there they chain hop, they exchange hop, and I can walk through those terms if you. I'm not sure.
I think we get
aware
it.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if chain hopping is just swapping from one chain to another, either over a bridge or however you want.
Yeah,
to do
exactly.
It,
but they're typically going
makes it difficult, obfuscates the chain of custody over time, makes it a little harder, they think, for analytics firms like you to follow.
That's right. Well, it's actually harder for the forensics companies to follow. They'll move to Tether and places like that where it's like it's harder to automatically follow it. We have not that the forensics companies don't have this, but we have an Intel team that often does this by hand.
Yeah.
Right. So like we're by hand going from Bitcoin to Ethereum to Tron to Tether and tracing.
And we can see the inflow at the same time that it exited the other one. We assume that it's the
and then we have like the company names on top of it, and then we'll often even work with exchanges to get like what is like here's the company names that we have, the people names that we have, and then it's like some like random preteen in Thailand that just so happens to have $50 million worth of crypto associated to their name. That's where it ends. Yeah.
So $5 billion, and this is just ongoing. It's evil catfishing that results in an investment vehicle scam.
Yes. But the catch is, so a lot of what you'll read in the news is like the example I give you, right? Like farmer loses $500,000 to scam, right?
Yeah.
Public school teacher in Troy, Michigan. What's not as well reported on is that this isn't like, well, now I think it's morphing into a type of scam. Like Nigerian prince scam, where it's just like people doing it randomly.
Yeah.
But for the most part, still, this is not that. This is a well-organized transnational criminal group operating out of China and border countries.
It's not a type of scam. It is an ongoing, specific, major operation. It's not just a class of scam at this point.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's moving into class of scam.
Well, other people are probably like, wait a sec, we should do this.
We can make a lot of money.
So it'll become a whole.
Yeah.
But this is is this like a CCP? Is this the Chinese? Is this sanctioned by? I mean, China doesn't like crypto. They're allowing all this crypto to flow into their country, into the hands of criminals.
We can get into that.
What's the geopolitical situation here?
Yeah. So like, not that we have anything that's like specifically tied to the CCP. Of course.
I don't literally mean. I just mean like, is this the China? I always wonder this. I mean, is this China attacking the West to make money, or is this just criminals? Yeah.
I think that there are major national security implications for this.
That's the smarter way to ask it. What are the national security and geopolitical implications of this?
There are like it exists, right?
Yeah.
I think like from a what the CCP says publicly and what's happening in reality are two different things. I find it hard to believe, while we don't have any direct evidence, I find it hard to believe that the CCP is not aware that there are billions of dollars flowing into their country and right on their borders from what we know is a transnational criminal group operating and they are Chinese, that they don't know about that.
Yeah.
Right. So that's as far as we've gotten. We know that the money is flowing ultimately into China. But like anything that's directly related to CCP, no.
Right,
you know
right.
what I mean? And obviously a lot of this goes through Hong Kong too, and we can debate the merits of, how China uses Hong Kong as an avenue for,
Yeah, and it's I was actually just looking, there was just recently the protest in Israel over this contentious election with Netanyahu, and I was thinking back to the Hong Kong protests with all the umbrellas and how that issue, China has, I think since then certainly firmed their grip on Hong Kong over time, which has actually made, by the way, the Hong Kong sort of pivot on digital assets more recently quite interesting.
Yes.
But let's talk more about like the geopolitical stuff, because I know Inca has, you talked about, for example, like the precursor materials to weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
Again, since you guys do some forensics, but it's sort of a different service. But you also said you have some, government agencies that are clients.
Yeah.
We know that I once pulled from the, whatever it is, the vendor registry the U.S. government publishes who they spend money on, and they've spent and they've spent money on the forensics companies for years, right? It makes sense. IRS does it, right? FBI. I mean, even the Border Patrol, I think, was paying money on. So what are the geopolitical implications for a nation state, the national security implications, like broadly? Define that set for me in cryptocurrency. Like what are nation states looking at? What is the U.S. looking at? I don't know, like to the extent you can describe to me because I'm pretty sure the U.S. doesn't care that much, again, at like the federal government level, on the national security side, merely like, our exchanges conduct them like proper KYC. Like parts of the government obviously care. FinCEN cares, right? I mean, but like, what are the real national security level implications of cryptocurrencies?
Yeah. So let me answer a slightly
big question. Yeah.
No, it's okay. Yeah. Let me answer a slightly different question first, and then I'll give you a couple like use case examples, right?
Cool.
So like first, from like a high level, what Inca does and cares about is providing data and services to not just government agencies, right, but to all three of those different sectors that we talked about, right, providing the same data. And that can be national security related stuff like, KYC, or, what are the North Koreans doing? What are the Chinese doing? Where are they laundering money, et cetera. It can also just be things like market data analytics, like how do we get closer to a Bitcoin ETF and what data and services can Inca provide for us as a community to get there, right? Cross-market surveillance, stuff like this. But then those same cross-market surveillance tools can be used, tweaked and then used for other purposes to identify money laundering, right? To build models to identify TTPs, to identify particular types of trafficking. Okay, so with the outset, that's what we do, and so I think that there's a couple big national security implications, and examples of scams and frauds and things like that are only one. There's a lot happening. So like we can talk about the way that the United States operates and the way that the West operates oftentimes is different than the way, for better or worse, I'm not placing a value judgment on the way that some of our near peers operate. So I'll give you two examples and kind of the intersection of these things. So we ran an operation with a DoD partner where we were looking at something at the outset looks nonsensical. We were looking at illegal fisheries in South America. Okay. Why does the DoD care about illegal fisheries in South America? Why? And what nexus does that have to crypto, right? So what's happening is there are basically Chinese multitudes of Chinese fishing vessels off the major port cities in South America, and they're fishing for nearly extinct animals there, and then they catch them, and then they make whatever food they make from them, and then sell them to folks in these port cities, right? Why was Inca involved in this, and what is the nexus to crypto? Well, it just so happens that those same fishing vessels that are used to catch like, nearly extinct seahorses or whatever, also are used to traffic people.
Oh, wow.
And also are used to traffic precursor drugs.
For like fentanyl trade and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, that are ultimately routed up into the United States, right? And it's all done in crypto. And increasingly, it's done with the digital yuan. So you can go...
Really?
Yes. So you can go to port cities in, let's say, Ecuador, and trade and buy things using the digital yuan right now. It's happening right now.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Are people buying anything in those, like, did you see like legitimate uses of the digital yuan then?
Oh, yes.
But these guys are also using it. So that's how it's flowing in. The digital yuan is primarily flowing in through this trade.
And it's still largely like Chinese communities in those port cities, right? But it's flowing over into like the local population too. So that's one example of it.
Rare,
CBDC
near
actually,
extinct seahorses. Adam, I'm gonna have nightmares about this.
Yes.
These poor seahorses.
Yeah. Destroying the environment. That's
interesting.
That's one. Yeah. So that's one example, right? So I think from a national. Here's my opinion on national security writ large, and my interest in particular is Russia and China, and then those two vis-a-vis North Korea as well, right? Those three. So those three total. So I think if you kind of separate it out into like three categories. You have this kind of like quasi illegal, but quasi, arguably government-backed operations like pig butchering, like illegal fisheries, things like that.
What about like Lazarus Group? Does that fit in there?
Lazarus Group, exactly. So those types of things, and how does Lazarus Group move their crypto to fiat? It's through Chinese OTC for the most part. Yeah. Right. So so that's kind of like category one, illegal stuff, right? Category two is like the digital yuan and CBDCs, and we can talk about how those are used globally, and the Chinese setting up bilateral agreements globally. So we've got that. Category three, and actually the one that I'm most worried about is how much liquidity is offshore, how much of that liquidity is in Hong Kong, and Chinese control of that liquidity ultimately, which goes back to what the United States is doing and our
our regulatory approach to the crypto.
Our regulatory approach to crypto, and again, we're obviously ultimately a neutral data provider, right? So it's not that I have specific policy recommendations aside from saying that we need to move liquidity back to the United States.
I see. So when you say you're most concerned about, you mean for like American competitiveness?
American competitiveness. Yeah. The innovation needs to be here. Obviously all the large liquidity providers, this better than me, right? They're moving offshore. They're closing the doors on crypto completely, at least for the time being. That needs to move back onshore. Because right now of the centralized exchanges, only 3 of the top 15 exchanges by spot and derivatives volume are not Chinese founded in Hong Kong.
Wow.
That to me, that's a problem.
Yeah. And it also can amplify the first 2 problems too.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
It's not just that we're wow, that's I'm still a little shook by the seahorses, the rare seahorses. I didn't know this poor thing. I thought they were cute. People eat seahorses. All right, I'm sorry.
Well, ultimately, they're going to die anyway. From our
everything dies.
Jokes.
I was joking. Let's talk about the concept. Like, this has been fascinating. You guys work on some really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there are serious implications for American competitiveness, as I think many people interested in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies do.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about blockchain forensic, the ethos, because I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people personally who really don't like companies like Inca or Chainalysis. They think it's somehow anathema to the cypherpunk ethos that underpins Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That essentially, and I don't hear that like Inca's not. Even Chainalysis isn't even often the one that people are really upset about right now is this Arkham intelligence one.
Yeah, that one's
that's actually pretty accelerationist what they're doing. It's like
trying to do.
It's a doxing marketplace. It's like a little different than what you guys do.
Yes.
But like how do you think about that? I mean, I know you're a proponent and we've heard the leadership of Chainalysis and Elliptic many times in Congress and otherwise also, I think passionately talk about how they believe in the future of cryptocurrencies. How do you square your belief and passion for cryptocurrencies with the intelligence side of it and the criticism that some levy against a company like Inca?
So it's, like maybe this is a little quippy, but I'm not anti-crypto, right? I'm just like anti-stealing people's money, right? I'm not anti-crypto. I'm just anti-centralized exchange, committing massive amounts of fraud and setting crypto back a decade.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-crypto. I'm just anti-North Korea hacking into a barely secured video game and stealing $600 million worth of crypto to fund their nuclear proliferation efforts, right? I think like our work is necessary in order to like mature and grow crypto globally, right? And like I said, so like we do that, but we're also working on data analytics to help bolster an ETF here in the United States, which I think everybody is for, at least for the most part, right? Yeah. So I have a couple other points. The second is, so like if you go on our website, you'll see some reports, which I know that you've seen, right, where we call out specific exchanges, specific actors on things that they do, things that we have seen. With every single one of those reports, we always reach out to the subjects of those reports first, and in some cases, it's me literally begging them to like take a phone call, right? Like where I reach out to an exchange and I'm like, hey, we see that you're providing services to sanctioned Russian banks. Here's the data. Can we talk? Now, obviously, like a little bit of this is like, I want to sell them services.
Right.
But like, honestly, if they just said like, okay, we're not going to buy any of your shit, Inca, but
I see what happens. So like you're saying, guys, FYI, like you need help like preventing this.
Yeah.
Sometimes they say, no, we're good.
No, not sometimes. I mean, it's like most of the time they don't even respond
I'm
to
saying
my
they're
email.
well aware.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're like, no, we're cool, right? Then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm going public with it then.
Because I guess you're criminals, basically.
Yeah. So I think there's that.
Yeah.
Well, there is that, and then the other thing I would say is like, in terms of like ethos, I think it's a little honestly naive to think that you like that. All of this, the approach is openness, right? And it's naive to think that that is not going to be used for intelligence, for ferreting out bad behavior. And I think that the ask should be not that it doesn't happen, but that it's done in a responsible and ethical way and in an open way. We're the ones that are doing it, right? We are selling this data to the government. We also sell this data openly, the majority of it, to anybody else that wants to buy it. Right. And we do it openly, right? Like I'm sitting here on your podcast talking about it.
You're not a secret spy agency. It's a commercial business using mostly publicly available information, right?
Yep.
It's an analytics. It's open source intelligence analytics.
Yes.
Is it OSINT?
It is OSINT.
Yeah.
It's FOSINT, financial OSINT.
Financial OSINT. I like it.
Yeah.
Because I just now I'm just getting geeky, but like IMINT is one of my favorites. One of the least sounding, but like image intelligence. I used to spend hours and hours and hours.
Oh yeah, like
on Google
Walmart,
Earth.
Walmart parking lot information.
So I'm not good at this, but yes, you can look at like the amount of oil tankers, right? Mm-hmm. Hedge funds do this stuff all like crazy. Yeah. Yes, the amount of cars parked out of Walmart like during Christmas can give you an idea of like what the spending is going to look like. But what I like to do is, and I actually have somewhere a Google Earth file, like which I know like could seem a little sketchy to a three-letter agency, is just look at like military bases everywhere. Not in the U.S. I spent a whole bunch of time identifying a whole bunch in Iran just for fun. Yeah. Because you can see airstrips. You really can't cover these up. Like they're airstrips. Yeah. There was a hilarious one. I'm really going off a tangent here, but there's a hilarious one in North Korea I found where they try to make it look like in the apron next to an airstrip, there's either hangars or sometimes there's just these little roads where you just park a plane, right? Like, and they try to make them look like little houses, and I'm like, dude, I can see there's a plane under there. Anyway,
like the wings are sticking out of this house.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a
similar
good example.
Those pictures are there. Yeah. I can see them. It's not my fault for looking at them.
Well, dude, like we had one. This is an old one, but when Venezuela built their like oil-backed coin, what was the name of it?
The Petro.
The Petro, yes.
The Petro.
So when they built that and they built some infrastructure around it, right? everybody rightfully kind of like laughed at like how bungled the launch was and everything. And we released a report about how it was the Russians that were helping them out. And this like got a lot of people in crypto and also like in the DoD shook. Yeah. Right. Like why? How did we find it? There's pictures of Russians with Maduro, like, literally like shaking hands on Twitter, talking about the fact that they're doing this, right? It's like, it's right there. There's images of it, and we can like identify all the people. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there, and you're right. I think I agree that in one way, a public blockchain is a public blockchain, and the information is public. Now the analysis, it's not right. We talk about like pseudonymity.
Yeah. Right.
Versus, my name's not on the Bitcoin blockchain unless I put it there. I can put it there. You can inscribe it, for example. My photo is on there. I inscribed it. Inscription 10888 is my Twitter avatar. It's nearly sub 10,000 inscription. Anyway, point being, but there is a lot of information. There's so much information. And other blockchains like Ethereum, there's even more information.
Yep.
And someone's going to use it. You're saying you're trying to use it for good, right? You're trying to stop crime, stop scams, stop people buying, fissile material or fentanyl products.
That's right. Among other things. Right? Among also, like I said, providing cross-market surveillance. That's the
other thing, right? Also, like, hey, I need intelligence on the market because I'm a trader, an investor, a business, whatever. So
and then you can combine those types of data sets together, and we can. That's the key piece, right? You can look at centralized exchange market data and see, okay, here's every executed trade that's happening, and it looks like we know from our blockchain analytics, or we know from what people are talking about on the dark web, that this money went here and they're trading this exact amount every hour on the hour for a week straight, and then they go quiet or whatever it is. Yeah, so.
All right, so we're almost at the end here. Yeah. Before we wrap, what are you most excited about for Inca or for the crypto markets? Like, what's right on your sort of near-term horizon that's getting you, hyped about your day-to-day?
That's a good question. I think, I'll answer from like a really broad perspective. I think that we're on the precipice of another like crypto bull run. A lot of market activity, like it's going to happen soon. And I think we're just going to see a lot of changes to the ecosystem generally. And I'm just excited to be a part of it, honestly.
Me too. Yeah. Adam Zarazinski, CEO of Inca Digital. Thank you so much for coming on Galaxy
Thanks, man.
Brains,
I appreciate the time. Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
That's it for this episode of Galaxy Brains. Thanks to our guest, Adam Zarazinski, CEO of Inca Digital, and our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading, as always. Great conversation. Really enjoyed it. I hope you did too, and I hope you have a safe and happy weekend. We'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. If you enjoy the show, please like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Galaxy Research, sign up for our weekly newsletter at gdr.email, read our content at galaxy.com/research, and follow us on Twitter at GLXY Research. See you next week.